we know that this is occurring. People are moving all over and totally reorganizing their social and ceremonial systems and residential systems once again. People leave to the Rio Grande Valley pueblos in New Mexico, and also the western pueblos, Acoma, Zuni, Hopi, Upper Little Colorado, Mogollon Rim, on the and these are all discussed in the articles for this week. So as people move into these regions, they formed villages that were later encountered by the Spanish, the Mexicans, and the Americans. And as the readings talk about, the pueblos are unique for tribes in the Southwest because they have lived in many of their villages for over 1,000 years. It depends on who you ask or what pueblo you ask, but Taos Pueblo or Hopi will say that they have some of the longest occupied villages in the Western Hemisphere, and they'd be correct. Whether who has the oldest one is always up for debate, but some of these villages extend over 1,000 years into the past. So the Pueblo people are really known for the distinctive dwellings and connections to their past, the ancestral Pueblo people. This image on the left here is from Taos Pueblo, located in northern New Mexico. And this is the traditional Pueblo. Obviously in the past there wouldn't be doors on the side. All entrances would be through ladders in the roof. But the Taos Pueblo is one of the most conservative of the Pueblos. There's still no running water or electricity servicing the Pueblo. The only running water through town is a small creek that divides the Pueblo and runs through the center plaza through town. The Pueblo people really lived through the Four Corners area and throughout northern New Mexico traditionally. And although there have been, there's now 28 villages that are in a much smaller area, the Pueblo people still consider the traditional use land to be much of the Colorado Plateau. There are about 40,000 people. There were about 40,000 people living at the Pueblos at the time of the Spanish contact. And today, although those numbers severely declined due to colonial oppression and also diseases, those populations today have grown back up to about 35,000 people. Like I had mentioned, and I'll talk about in the next slide, there are, although the Pueblo people can be grouped as one people with a shared history and a shared idea of religion and society, there are cultural and linguistic differences amongst the Pueblos. And these really break down into 4 separate language families represented among the Pueblo population. There are 3 main regional divisions. These are talked about in the Griffin Pierce article, so I won't go into a big description here, but they include the Western Pueblos, the Eastern Caribbean Pueblos, and the Tonawin Pueblos. And the Tonawin Pueblos include the Tewa, Tiwa, and Towa language groups. And I just bring that up because I'm not going to be quizzing you on that, but I'm interested, and my dissertation research is focused on the Tewa Pueblos that are located south of Taos, New Mexico, and north of Santa Fe, New Mexico. There are linguistic similarities and variation across the region, and Griffin Pierce talks a lot about this, is that amongst the western Pueblos, such as Hopi and Zuni, you have a matrilineal, matrilocal focus on society, and everything's based in clans. And this is very similar to our discussions on Apache and Navajo clans earlier this week. We'll skip to the bottom. In the Eastern Tonawin, or the Tewa, Tiwa, and Towa groups, you don't have a focus on clan, but rather you have a focus on moiety. So all society is divided into 2 groups of people, and that these groups of people, which are affiliated with one or the other, has its own chief that takes control of the Pueblo on a semi-annual basis. So there's amongst the Tewa, there's the summer people and the winter people, and the summer people have control of the Pueblo during the summer, and the winter people during the winter, and they alternate through the year. In the middle, the Parisian Pueblos, which is known as the Parisian Bridge, and the reason it's called Parisian Bridge is because the Parisian Pueblos share traits from both the Western and Eastern Pueblos. They have a centralized political authority through medicine societies. Then they both have sort of this moiety to system sort of organization, but at the same time clans are important. So when they talk about a bridge, that means it's kind of a mix between the two eastern and western groups of pueblos. There's been a lot of questions about why does this regional variation exist between western and eastern pueblos. And archaeologists throughout the past and anthropologists have come up with a variety of possibilities, possible reasons that include variations in irrigation practices between east and west, warfare, prehistoric cultural influence, and Spanish influence as well. And besides the irrigation practice, which is kind of a bogus claim, the most of the irrigation that the eastern pueblos were participating in was introduced by the Spanish anyhow, so there's not that much difference between them. These all could be reasons. Part of my dissertation research is trying to understand how during this migration event that was both described in Pueblo history, the oral traditions, and what we see as archaeologists, how these migrations of multiple people coming together could have made each Pueblo group unique in ways of their cosmology, or their religion, or their social organization. And so archaeologists still have to figure out a lot why the Pueblos historically look different through time. The Griffin Pierce article talks about, and this is something we're going to come back to in the next couple weeks of the class, contemporary issues, but land and water rights continue to be a real issue and concern and challenge amongst Pueblo groups, as well as the protection of ritually significant sites. So one of the great examples is Taos Blue Lake, which is thought to be the place where the Taos people emerged into this world, so a very important place. And the water from the little lake flows out of the mountains, the Sangre de Cristo mountains, and into the village itself. And so the people are actually physically connected with their place of emergence through this creek. And this creek and lake was owned by the Forest Service until about 50 years ago, when the Tewa Pueblos were able to actually get it back on their reservation from the U.S. government. And there are a series of cases like this where native peoples are fighting for and winning back their ritually significant sites from either private land or the government. Today, the Pueblo people really benefit from a number of economic enterprises, including tourism and gaming. One of the most interesting examples, I think, is at Taos Pueblo, where it's one of the most conservative pueblos. The pueblos itself doesn't have running water or electricity. However, there is a very nice casino on the premises and a ski hill as well. And so you have this giving modern conveniences to the tourists, but still preserving a very conservative lifeway. And so oftentimes in the pueblos you have this kind of two minds about modernization. And this is something that hopefully we can talk about in the discussion sections, trying to keep your modern traditional values, but also bringing in money for the pueblo, and that includes gaming and tourism. And also the pueblos are a very close proximity to a number of cities, including Albuquerque, Santa Fe, and education and jobs has really helped, but also hastened these problems in many of these pueblos as well. Of course, this is my area of interest, and I just still gave you a very, very tiny thumbnail sketch. Please take a look at the readings and the discussion. They're long this week, but they're very good. And hopefully with this lecture and the readings and the discussion board and the homework, this will all start to make sense. I just wanted you to consider a few things setting up for next week and the discussion post for tomorrow. Maybe talk about tribal casinos, cultural tourism, other economic pursuits, and say how do you I'm wondering how you keep cultural values and traditions, but also at the same time bring in money and cater to the wants of the non-native people who are your neighbors. Um, Next week's articles take a lot closer look at some aspects of life on reservations, so I think a lot of you might like that, and be able to comment on that more. We'll stop the survey of groups and actually get into contemporary issues. Um, and yeah, and rather than surveying all the culture, history, and practices of the Southwest, which is useful, I kind of want to spend the remaining part of this class going into some of these more nuts and bolts case issues and really sort of exploring contemporary dilemmas. And as you read, feel free to post questions, and be sure to watch those lecture modules. These lectures are good, and they at least let you know what I think is important, which might be on quizzes, etc. So anyways, have a great rest of the week and the weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.